Weeks passed. Eleanor's tests grew subtler, more revealing. She observed the office's social hierarchy, the way Clara manipulated others, the way Wendy quietly navigated challenges without complaint. Before we continue, please take a moment to click on the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you can be notified when next we post amazing story like this here. Thank you. Once upon a time, in a city that glittered with wealth and power, there lived a woman named Eleanor Whitmore. She was the widow of Charles Whitmore, a titan of industry whose name alone carried influence across continents. He had built a conglomerate brick by brick, deal by deal, his vision sweeping from finance to real estate, from manufacturing to philanthropy. But despite all the wealth, all the accolades, Eleanor's most treasured possession had always been her son, Alexander. He was her only child, the living embodiment of her love and devotion, and she had nurtured him with care, teaching him dignity, respect, and the value of a strong heart. Alexander had spent years abroad, studying at the finest institutions, mastering not just the language of business but the subtle nuances of leadership. He had returned to take over the Whitmore empire, a polished, refined young man ready to command a legacy that spanned decades. But Eleanor's mind was troubled. She had seen the kind of women who flocked to wealthy men, beautiful faces, perfect smiles, hearts hollow and hollowed by ambition. She could not bear to see her son's heart preyed upon by someone who loved gold more than him. Eleanor conceived a plan, one that required patience, humility, and secrecy. She would disguise herself as a cleaner in the Whitmore offices. No one would know that the powerful widow, the owner of the conglomerate, walked among them in plain clothes, observing quietly, testing the hearts of those who might seek to capture her son's attention. On the morning she enacted her plan, Eleanor donned a faded uniform, old rubber slippers soft against the polished floors, a loosely tied scarf hiding her silver hair, and a mop and bucket in her hands. The office buzzed with energy as she entered. Heads turned, and for a moment, the room held its breath. Then laughter erupted. "Who let this old woman in here?" a young woman sneered, her voice dripping with amusement. "Maybe she got lost on her way to the village," another giggled, and the group behind them tittered, their eyes dancing with mischief. Eleanor's shoulders straightened. She had lived a life of respect, authority, and influence, but now, in their eyes, she was nothing more than a joke. Yet one young woman, Wendy, did not laugh. She remained at her desk, focused on her work, her gaze calm, neutral, and untainted by the cruelty surrounding her. Eleanor noticed her immediately, sensing the warmth and decency in her presence, a rare quality in a world enamored with power and appearances. Day after day, Eleanor performed her tasks with quiet diligence. She mopped floors, cleaned windows, and arranged supplies, her back aching from long hours, her hands roughened from labor. And all the while, she watched. She observed the young women who flitted through the office, their laughter sharp and their smiles fake, all competing for attention, power, and influence. Some were cruel, like Clara, a striking woman with calculated charm and an ambition that hid behind her beauty. She mocked, sneered, and pushed, attempting to humiliate Eleanor at every opportunity. But Wendy, ever patient, helped without hesitation. When Eleanor stumbled under the weight of her bucket, Wendy's hands were there to steady her, her voice soft and tender as she asked if she was all right. Eleanor felt a lump rise in her throat. Years of solitude since her husband's passing had left her heart heavy, but here, in the eyes of this quiet young woman, she found comfort. Wendy's kindness was simple, genuine, and without expectation. Eleanor knew she had found someone worth watching, someone whose heart was pure amidst the venality of the office. The days passed in a rhythm of observation and subtle tests. Eleanor introduced small challenges, moments designed to reveal character. She spilled water on the floor, she dropped supplies, she endured ridicule and mockery, all while noting how each employee responded. Some laughed, some sneered, some walked past in indifferent silence, and a rare few, like Wendy, offered help, kindness, and respect without a hint of condescension. One afternoon, Eleanor prepared a simple meal in her modest home, a humble spread of jollof rice with roasted chicken and vegetables. She invited Wendy over under the guise of sharing a meal with a neighbor. Wendy arrived, curious but unaware of the true identity of her hostess. The house was neat and tidy, modest but comfortable, exuding a warmth that was missing in the glittering office. As they ate, conversation flowed freely. Wendy spoke of her family, her dreams, her small acts of kindness, and Eleanor listened intently, observing every word, every expression. She noted that Wendy never mentioned wealth, never flinched at the modest surroundings, never sought praise. She was genuine, her heart untarnished by ambition or vanity. Eleanor felt a surge of hope. Perhaps, at last, her son's future companion was here, disguised in simplicity, shining in quiet integrity. Meanwhile, Alexander returned to the city. The airport was alive with the clamor of families, travelers, and taxis, but his eyes, trained on purpose, were already focused on the office where Eleanor moved unseen among the staff. Women straightened at his arrival, applying makeup, adjusting skirts, trying to appear impeccable before the air. Clara, ambitious and poised, took every opportunity to catch his attention, her charm sharp and calculated. Alexander, however, noticed something else entirely, the kindness, the warmth, the quiet dignity of Wendy, whose gaze met his in a fleeting moment that left him unsettled and intrigued. Clara, aware of her competition, began her subtle campaign. She leaned close to Alexander, feigned interest, offered advice and insight, all the while masking her ambition behind practiced smiles and soft laughter. Eleanor observed silently, taking note of every whisper, every glance, every calculated move. She recognized the danger Clara posed, and she was determined to protect her son's heart. Wendy, by contrast, remained humble, kind, and unassuming. She continued to help Eleanor, unaware of the true stakes, unaware that her small acts of kindness were weaving her into the very fabric of the Whitmore family legacy. She endured whispers, sneers, and false assumptions from her peers, yet she never wavered, her integrity shining brighter under scrutiny. Weeks passed. Eleanor's tests grew subtler, more revealing. She observed the office's social hierarchy, the way Clara manipulated others, the way Wendy quietly navigated challenges without complaint. Small incidents, a dropped pen, a spilled cup, a misfiled document, served as moments of truth. How did each woman react? Did they seek to help or exploit? Did they act out of self-interest or genuine care? In one such moment, Eleanor intentionally stumbled with a heavy stack of papers in the hallway. Laughter erupted from nearby desks, some mocking, others merely amused. Clara's lips twitched in delight, eager to watch another's misfortune. But Wendy moved forward immediately, steadying Eleanor's arm, ensuring she did not fall further, and offering kind words without hesitation. It was in these quiet acts, repeated day after day, that Eleanor saw the stark difference between appearance and character. She watched Alexander from afar, noting how he responded to her son's natural curiosity and charm, and how Clara attempted to manipulate his perceptions. She observed every meeting, every whispered conversation, and every attempt to garner favor, noting the subtle contrasts between greed and integrity. Eleanor realized that her role as a cleaner, her humility and patience, had allowed her a vantage point that no amount of wealth or power could provide. She was invisible, yet omnipresent. She could see the true character of those around her, unmasked by the trappings of status and ambition. And in this quiet observation, she found hope that one day, the right heart would be recognized, and the wrong intentions would be exposed. Evenings were spent in reflection. Eleanor would sit in her modest home, preparing simple meals, and ponder the lessons of the day. She thought of her son, of the legacy he was about to inherit, and of the woman who might share his life. Wendy had shown the patience, kindness, and courage that Eleanor valued above all else. She had endured ridicule, temptation, and deception without compromising her character. Eleanor knew in her heart that the test was far from over, but Wendy had passed the first, crucial steps. Alexander, meanwhile, found himself drawn to Wendy's quiet presence, her simplicity, her honesty. Her laughter was not calculated, her words were not rehearsed, and her eyes held a depth that fascinated him. He had encountered many women who sought to charm and manipulate, yet Wendy's authenticity struck him profoundly. Eleanor watched their interactions, her mind racing with both caution and anticipation. She knew the true trials were yet to come. And so, in the heart of the glittering city, Eleanor Whitmore, the matriarch in disguise, continued her quiet work, observing, testing, and guiding. The office buzzed with ambition and rivalry, with whispers and schemes, yet amidst it all, a quiet, genuine heart had begun to shine. Wendy was unaware of the tests she had passed, and Alexander was unaware of the mother's watchful eye. But the stage had been set, the players had taken their places, and the first act of Eleanor's intricate plan was unfolding flawlessly. The days ahead would test patience, courage, and integrity. Friendships would be strained, ambitions challenged, and hearts exposed. Yet Eleanor, steady and determined, knew that the truth would prevail, and that only those of pure character would endure the trials to come. The city gleamed beyond the office windows, indifferent to human scheming, yet within its walls, a quiet revolution of character and conscience had begun. The cleaner, unseen by many, had become the arbiter of truth. And as she wiped the polished floors, adjusted the scattered papers, and endured the laughter and ridicule, Eleanor Whitmore smiled to herself, knowing that the first steps of her plan had succeeded. Wendy, oblivious to the full scope of the test, continued to act with integrity. Alexander, drawn subtly into her orbit, felt the first stirrings of admiration and curiosity. And Eleanor, disguised, patient, and wise, prepared for the trials that would come, knowing that the ultimate judgment of character was yet to unfold. The first act was complete. The mask had been worn, the players observed, and the stage set. What remained was to see who would endure the temptations, who would betray, and who would rise with honesty and courage. The days following Eleanor's entrance into the Whitmore offices in disguise settled into a rhythm that seemed ordinary to anyone observing from the outside. Yet inside, the quiet drama of human character was unfolding like a delicate, intricate dance. Eleanor, the matriarch disguised as a humble cleaner, continued her work in silence, her eyes sharp, her mind alert. Every interaction, every glance, every whisper was noted. The office buzzed with ambition, gossip, and subtle rivalries, but Eleanor was immune to the distractions. She had a mission, to observe the hearts that surrounded her son and to protect him from deception. Wendy became the center of Eleanor's attention, though not in the way her peers might have expected. The young woman moved quietly through the office, completing her tasks without fanfare, helping colleagues where she could, and showing the kind of integrity Eleanor valued above all else. Day by day, Eleanor introduced small, deliberate challenges designed to reveal character. She would accidentally spill water, drop a stack of papers, or misplace an important file, creating situations that could expose selfishness, cruelty, or honesty. Some of the younger staff, including Clara, wasted no time exploiting these moments. Clara, with her perfect smile and calculated charm, saw Eleanor's mistakes as opportunities to impress Alexander. She whispered commentary to other staff, staged subtle demonstrations of competence, and always ensured that her actions were visible to the young heir. Her ambition was relentless, her strategy sharp, and her heart entirely self-serving. The days following Eleanor's entrance into the Whitmore offices in disguise settled into a rhythm that seemed ordinary to anyone observing from the outside. Yet inside, the quiet drama of human character was unfolding like a delicate, intricate dance. Eleanor, the matriarch disguised as a humble cleaner, continued her work in silence, her eyes sharp, her mind alert. Every interaction, every glance, every whisper was noted. The office buzzed with ambition, gossip, and subtle rivalries, but Eleanor was immune to the distractions. She had a mission, to observe the hearts that surrounded her son and to protect him from deception. Wendy became the center of Eleanor's attention, though not in the way her peers might have expected. The young woman moved quietly through the office, completing her tasks without fanfare, helping colleagues where she could, and showing the kind of integrity Eleanor valued above all else. Day by day, Eleanor introduced small, deliberate challenges designed to reveal character. She would accidentally spill water, drop a stack of papers, or misplace an important file, creating situations that could expose selfishness, cruelty, or honesty. Some of the younger staff, including Clara, wasted no time exploiting these moments. Clara, with her perfect smile and calculated charm, saw Eleanor's mistakes as opportunities to impress Alexander. She whispered commentary to other staff, staged subtle demonstrations of competence, and always ensured that her actions were visible to the young heir. Her ambition was relentless, her strategy sharp, and her heart entirely self-serving. Wendy, by contrast, reacted instinctively with care and concern. She helped Eleanor quietly, without seeking recognition. She offered assistance when others turned away, offered words of kindness when others sneered, and in doing so, began to reveal the qualities Eleanor had been searching for. In the eyes of Eleanor, Wendy was becoming a beacon of integrity in a sea of ambition and vanity. One morning, Eleanor prepared a modest breakfast for Wendy, sending an invitation that read simply, "Come share a meal at my home. No one else. Just you." Wendy hesitated initially, curiosity mingled with cautious politeness, but her respect for Eleanor, whom she called Mama, drew her forward. She arrived to find a simple, neat home, modest yet filled with warmth. The aroma of freshly cooked food welcomed her, a dish of roasted vegetables, baked chicken, and a small side of homemade bread. Wendy took her seat, hesitated only briefly, and then began to eat, savoring the flavors without concern for pretension. Clara, if she had been there, would have sneered at the humble meal, dismissed it as insignificant, or worse, mocked Wendy for choosing to dine there. But Wendy's focus was on Eleanor, on the conversation, and on the quiet moments of human connection that these meals provided. Over the course of several dinners, Eleanor began to share small stories of life, of past mistakes, of lessons learned. Wendy listened, laughed at Eleanor's dry humor, and offered her own insights with honesty and tact. Each meal served not only as sustenance but as a window into character. Eleanor observed how Wendy reacted to modesty, to humility, to adversity. She noted her grace under pressure, her gentle deflection of gossip, and the authenticity with which she spoke of others. Meanwhile, Clara's plotting continued. She had begun a subtle campaign to undermine Wendy, spreading small rumors and attempting to entangle Alexander's attention in ways that would paint Wendy as naive or overly humble. She whispered suggestions to Alexander in private, praising her own insights while quietly casting doubt on Wendy's capabilities. Alexander, however, remained largely unaware, though Eleanor watched his reactions closely. The real turning point came one afternoon when a minor accident occurred in the office. Eleanor, carrying a stack of documents, tripped slightly, causing papers to scatter across the polished floor. Laughter erupted from nearby desks, some mocking, others merely amused. Clara's smile widened, certain that she had created a moment to embarrass Eleanor, and, by extension, Wendy, for assisting. But Wendy moved quickly, calmly, and with precision. She helped Eleanor gather the papers, ensured no damage occurred, and even reassured Eleanor with a quiet, sincere word, "It's all right, Mama. We'll get through this." Eleanor's heart swelled. This small act of kindness, unprompted by reward or recognition, was proof that Wendy's heart was genuine. She had begun to emerge as someone worthy of trust, someone capable of navigating both the office politics and the greater responsibilities that would eventually come with Alexander. Days later, Eleanor introduced another subtle test. She misplaced an important report, one that, if left uncorrected, could have caused minor confusion in a client presentation. She watched closely as Clara immediately seized the opportunity to draw attention to herself, pointing out errors that didn't exist, subtly manipulating colleagues into affirming her observations. Wendy, meanwhile, quietly sought Eleanor, asking how she could assist, and then took it upon herself to correct the oversight without calling attention to herself. Eleanor noted every detail. Clara's ambition was undeniable, but so was her lack of empathy and integrity. Wendy's care, discretion, and initiative, by contrast, revealed a heart both capable and wise. The contrast could not have been clearer. One evening, Eleanor invited Wendy to a quiet walk through the city gardens. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blossoms from the meticulously maintained hedges. They walked side by side, Eleanor sharing more stories of life, of hardship, and of the fleeting nature of trust. Wendy listened attentively, her eyes reflecting curiosity and thoughtfulness. "You have a rare gift, my daughter," Eleanor said softly. "You see people not as they appear, but as they are. You do not seek recognition, yet your actions leave a mark. That is something few possess." Wendy looked up, startled. "Mama, I don't know what to say. I try to do the right thing." "That is all anyone can do," Eleanor replied. "And yet, the world is not always fair. You will be tested in ways that may seem impossible. But remember, courage and kindness will guide you, even when others seek to deceive. Back at the office, Clara had begun to sense resistance. She noticed how Alexander occasionally lingered near Wendy, how his attention seemed momentarily captivated by her quiet demeanor. Clara's smile faltered at times, her confidence shaken by an invisible force she could neither name nor understand. Eleanor observed it all, knowing that the next phase of the test required both vigilance and subtle orchestration. The tipping point came when Clara attempted her first overt attack. She spread false rumors about Wendy, hinting at misappropriated office funds, suggesting that Wendy's kind demeanor masked ambition. The office buzzed with whispers, and for a moment, it seemed as if Wendy might falter under the scrutiny. But Eleanor had prepared her carefully, subtly coaching her on resilience, honesty, and composure. Wendy confronted the situation calmly, addressing questions with clarity, refusing to be drawn into conflict, and maintaining her dignity throughout. Eleanor's heart swelled. This was exactly the response she had hoped for. The integrity that Wendy displayed under scrutiny, the unwavering kindness she offered even to those who mocked her, had proven her worth beyond doubt. She had passed the second phase of the test. Meanwhile, Alexander's curiosity deepened. He had noticed the quiet confidence of Wendy, the way she interacted with others, and the way she handled adversity. He began to pay more attention, asking questions subtly, observing without intruding. Clara, unaware of the true depth of Wendy's character, escalated her manipulation, attempting to insert herself further into Alexander's attention, crafting scenarios designed to make Wendy appear ordinary. Yet Alexander's intuition told him otherwise. One afternoon, Eleanor orchestrated a larger test. She arranged for Wendy to encounter a challenging situation involving a client inquiry that had been intentionally misdirected. Wendy navigated it gracefully, maintaining professionalism while correcting misinformation, assisting colleagues, and demonstrating her knowledge without seeking undue credit. The office witnessed her competence, her humility, and her integrity. Eleanor's smile, hidden beneath her scarf, betrayed the satisfaction she felt. Clara, meanwhile, grew more desperate. She attempted to manipulate colleagues into undermining Wendy, spreading small lies and subtle accusations. But Eleanor's presence, though unseen by most, was felt by all. Wendy, guided by the quiet wisdom of Eleanor's mentorship, remained steadfast, navigating the office labyrinth with a grace and strength that slowly began to command respect, even from those who had once mocked her. In quiet moments after the office had emptied, Eleanor reflected on the unfolding events. She had watched deception, ambition, and malice in full force, yet she had also witnessed the emergence of integrity, courage, and kindness. Wendy had proven herself, quietly and without fanfare, the kind of person Eleanor had long sought for her son's future. The second act closed with a sense of cautious anticipation. Alexander, drawn increasingly toward Wendy's quiet strength, was unaware of the full depth of the matriarch's plan. Clara, sensing her influence waning, began to escalate her schemes, unaware that Eleanor had anticipated every move. The office had become a subtle battlefield of character, a test of hearts and integrity that only those with courage and honesty could navigate successfully. Eleanor, still in disguise, moved silently through the halls, her mop and bucket a symbol of humility and vigilance. She had seen enough to know that Wendy's character was genuine, yet she also knew that the most significant tests were yet to come. The future would demand more than kindness and resilience, it would demand unwavering courage in the face of manipulation, deception, and ambition. As the sun set over the city, casting golden light through the office windows, Eleanor prepared for the next stage. The young heir, Alexander, had begun to notice, the ambitious adversary, Clara, had begun to scheme, and Wendy, unknowing of the full orchestration of events, had begun to prove herself worthy. The delicate web of observation, testing, and revelation continued to weave itself quietly, the true drama of character unfolding under Eleanor's watchful eyes. In the quiet of her modest home that evening, Eleanor smiled. The test was far from over, but the first bonds of trust and integrity had been firmly established. Wendy had passed the trials thus far, and Alexander, though unaware of the depth of the matriarch's orchestration, had begun to glimpse the rare qualities that set Wendy apart. The stage was set for the next challenges that would test loyalty, reveal ambition, and expose the true hearts of all who dared to navigate the labyrinth of power and affection in the Whitmore Empire. The office hummed with its usual energy, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, printers whirring, and the faint murmur of conversations floating through the halls. But beneath this ordinary veneer, the currents of rivalry and ambition were gathering strength. Clara had grown frustrated with Wendy. No matter how subtle her manipulations, no matter how carefully she tried to undermine her, Wendy remained untouchable. Her humility, her competence, and her integrity acted as a shield against the petty schemes that had derailed others. Clara decided to escalate. She began carefully planting seeds of doubt, targeting Alexander indirectly. She whispered in casual conversation that Wendy had received private help from the management team, implying favoritism. She subtly highlighted minor mistakes in Wendy's reports, exaggerating them while remaining careful not to appear accusatory. But Eleanor, ever vigilant, observed it all. She had anticipated that Clara would attempt this escalation. With quiet precision, she adjusted her own tests, ensuring that Wendy's responses would reveal her character while also exposing the manipulator. She did not interfere overtly. Eleanor's method was patience. She allowed the chessboard to unfold naturally, confident that those who relied on deception would eventually expose themselves. The tipping point came during an important client review. Eleanor, in her guise as a cleaner, arranged for Wendy to be the point of contact for a complex issue that had been intentionally misdirected to her. It was a delicate situation, one that could easily have resulted in error or confusion. Clara, sensing an opportunity, leaned over Alexander's shoulder as he reviewed preliminary notes, whispering just loud enough for him to hear, "She's not ready for this responsibility. You might want to double-check her work." Alexander, however, had been observing Wendy closely for weeks. He had noticed her quiet competence, her careful attention to detail, and the integrity with which she treated her colleagues. Clara's words sparked only mild curiosity. They did not override the instinct that told him Wendy was different. Eleanor, watching from the periphery, allowed the moment to play out. She knew that Wendy's response would reveal everything. Wendy handled the client issue with grace. She corrected the misdirected information, reassured all involved, and ensured the project stayed on track. There was no panic, no blame, no defensiveness, only steady professionalism. Alexander, impressed and increasingly intrigued, took note. Clara, frustrated that her manipulations had failed yet again, grew desperate. She began to consider more drastic measures. Eleanor had predicted this escalation, and she prepared for the next phase of the test. The matriarch knew that Clara's ambition would drive her to cross lines, but she also knew that those with integrity would remain uncorrupted. One evening, Eleanor invited Wendy to her modest home under the guise of a quiet dinner. She had prepared a simple meal, using the act of cooking as a test of character and resilience. Wendy arrived, her curiosity piqued, but her intentions honest. As they ate, Eleanor subtly steered the conversation toward ethics, responsibility, and the consequences of choices. "You know, my daughter," Eleanor said, her tone gentle but firm, "there will be times when people offer you shortcuts, opportunities that seem easy but are tainted by dishonesty. How you respond in those moments says more about you than any achievement ever could." Wendy nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, Mama. I would like to do the right thing, even if it's hard." Eleanor smiled. "Then you are already showing the strength I value. Remember, some will try to trick you, tempt you, or deceive you. But your heart will guide you." Meanwhile, Clara had begun her next scheme. She had discovered a way to fabricate evidence against Wendy, creating a trail of financial discrepancies that appeared to implicate her in minor embezzlement. She edited emails, manipulated spreadsheets, and arranged for a random audit that would uncover the falsified data. Clara's confidence surged. She believed she had finally constructed a scenario that would force Wendy out of the office, discredit her, and leave Alexander's attention open for manipulation. The day of the audit arrived. Wendy, unaware of the trap set for her, approached her desk and began reviewing her work as usual. She noticed minor inconsistencies, strange email confirmations, unexpected financial entries, but assumed they were clerical errors rather than deliberate sabotage. Eleanor, observing from a distance, noted how Wendy responded. She investigated calmly, documented everything, and prepared a clear, honest explanation for the discrepancies. Clara, watching from the sidelines, felt a surge of panic. Wendy's composure under scrutiny was unraveling her plan. She had expected confusion, excuses, or fear, but instead Wendy demonstrated professionalism, transparency, and integrity. The audit began. The financial team, unaware of the manipulation, presented their findings. Clara smirked, confident in her victory, expecting Alexander to confront Wendy publicly. Instead, Wendy calmly explained the anomalies, showing documentation and a clear chain of reasoning that traced the discrepancies to external factors, not her own actions. Alexander listened intently, noting her honesty and methodical approach. Eleanor, hidden in the background, felt a swell of pride. Wendy had passed yet another critical test. Frustrated, Clara decided to escalate further. She arranged a private meeting with Wendy under the pretense of mentorship, intending to present a large sum of money, implying that acceptance would guarantee Alexander's attention. Clara's plan relied on temptation. She believed Wendy's financial struggles and human desires would lead her to compromise her integrity. The following evening, Wendy received a discreet message asking her to meet at a downtown cafe. Nervously, she complied, unsure of what to expect. Clara greeted her with a warm, rehearsed smile and placed a thick envelope on the table. "Wendy, I think we both know that Alexander is noticing you," Clara said, her voice honeyed and persuasive. "This is just a little token to help you, to make life easier. You don't need to struggle with bills, rent, or your family's needs. Just accept it, quietly, and we can understand each other better." Wendy's eyes widened. She stared at the money, her mind racing. It was a tempting offer, enough to relieve months of financial strain. Yet she recalled Eleanor's words, shortcuts tainted by dishonesty were tests of character, and integrity was the true measure of strength. "No," Wendy said softly but firmly. I can't take this. I won't compromise myself for money, no matter what it promises." Clara's smile faltered, replaced by disbelief and anger. You're making a huge mistake," she whispered, her tone dangerously low. "You'll regret this. You have no idea what you're refusing." Wendy stood her ground, returning the envelope, and left the cafe, her heart pounding but her conscience clear. Eleanor, observing nearby in disguise, had seen every moment. Wendy's refusal confirmed her purity of heart. She had passed a test that few could endure. The next morning, the office was buzzing. Clara, enraged by her failed attempt, retaliated. She manipulated digital evidence, crafting emails and reports that appeared to implicate Wendy in embezzlement. She spread the false narrative subtly among colleagues, ensuring that gossip would reach Alexander before clarification could be offered. The seeds of scandal were sown. Wendy, oblivious to the growing storm, arrived at her desk as usual, prepared for another day of work. Soon, whispers and glances began to reach her ears. Confused, she checked her phone to find messages suggesting that financial anomalies had been traced to her account. Fear and disbelief swept over her. She knew she had done nothing wrong, yet every piece of evidence seemed to point to her guilt. At that moment, Eleanor's presence became critical. She moved quietly, subtly supporting Wendy, guiding her to maintain composure, and preparing to intervene at the right moment. Alexander, meanwhile, was notified of the alleged discrepancies and rushed to the office, puzzled and concerned. He had trusted Wendy implicitly, yet the office's chaos suggested otherwise. Wendy's heart raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. She reviewed her own records, her work logs, and her documentation. Every detail confirmed her innocence, yet the fabricated evidence was overwhelming. Eleanor, ever observant, noted Wendy's integrity shining through her panic, her commitment to truth evident in every action. Alexander arrived at the office. The atmosphere was tense, colleagues whispered, eyes darting between Wendy and him. Clara's smirk radiated triumph as she watched, confident that victory was finally hers. But Alexander's instincts, honed through years of observing character, told him that something was amiss. Wendy's demeanor was too genuine, too consistent with everything he had observed. His attention sharpened, and he decided to investigate before passing judgment. The first signs of Clara's deception became apparent when Alexander reviewed the audit trail in depth. The inconsistencies pointed not to Wendy but to manipulated data and falsified reports. His suspicion grew, and he realized that someone had orchestrated a deliberate attempt to frame her. Eleanor, hidden from view, watched the moment unfold, her silent satisfaction tempered by the knowledge that the final exposure was yet to come. That evening, Wendy returned to Eleanor's home, exhausted and emotionally drained. She recounted the events, her voice trembling with a mixture of frustration, fear, and disbelief. Eleanor listened, her hand resting gently on Wendy's. "You see, my daughter," Eleanor said softly, "this is why character matters. Those who seek to deceive will eventually expose themselves. You have remained true, and that truth will guide you through the storm." Wendy nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Mama, I don't understand why this is happening. I've done nothing wrong." Sometimes, Eleanor continued softly, her eyes steady on Wendy's, life tests you not because you are guilty, but because the world wants to see what you are truly made of. You have shown courage, honesty, and integrity. That is rare, and it will not go unnoticed forever. Wendy wiped her eyes, trying to absorb the weight of Eleanor's words. She felt both comforted and anxious. How could she survive the storm that Clara had begun? The office, the accusations, and now the falsified evidence, it all seemed insurmountable. Eleanor's calm, however, reminded her that strength came not from fearlessness, but from perseverance and truth. The next morning, Wendy returned to the office with Eleanor's quiet guidance echoing in her mind. She walked through the doors with head held high, ignoring the whispers, the stares, and the subtle smirks. The tension in the office was palpable. Clara, sensing that her plan was teetering on the edge of collapse, grew reckless. She approached Alexander under the guise of concern, planting yet another seed of doubt about Wendy. Alexander, however, had begun his own quiet investigation. He requested the original logs, examined email chains, and cross-checked work histories. He compared discrepancies and found anomalies that did not match Wendy's documented work. Slowly, the pattern became undeniable: Wendy was being framed. Someone had intentionally manipulated files, emails, and financial records to make her appear guilty. Alexander's mind raced as he pieced together the chain of deception. His attention turned sharply to Clara, whose overconfidence now made her vulnerable. He remembered her too perfect demeanor, her calculated charm, and her sudden obsession with undermining Wendy. The pieces fit. He realized that the woman he had once trusted blindly was orchestrating a web of lies to discredit Wendy for personal gain. Meanwhile, Wendy continued her work, unaware that Alexander had begun to uncover the truth. She remained steadfast, answering questions, assisting colleagues, and completing her tasks with a calm resilience that contrasted sharply with Clara's rising desperation. Eleanor watched from a distance, proud that Wendy's integrity had remained unbroken. The pivotal moment came during a staff meeting. Alexander called an impromptu session, requesting the presence of everyone involved. The tension in the room was electric. Colleagues exchanged nervous glances, whispering rumors, and anticipating the confrontation. Clara, confident in her plan, leaned back in her chair, prepared to deliver a final, subtle attack on Wendy. Alexander began by reviewing the financial discrepancies. His voice was calm but firm. "I have reviewed the audit, the emails, and all reports related to the recent anomalies," he said, pausing to let his words sink in. "The evidence clearly indicates manipulation. The person responsible attempted to frame a colleague for personal gain. I now have all the information I need to identify the individual behind this." A hush fell over the room. Clara's confident smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. She tried to maintain composure, but the realization that she had been found out began to settle in. Alexander's gaze locked on her, piercing and unwavering. "Clara," Alexander continued, "it appears that you have been the architect of this deception. You manipulated data, altered reports, and attempted to coerce a colleague to act against their integrity. Is this true?" Clara's lips parted, searching for an excuse, a lie, or a diversion. But the room was filled with evidence, and every colleague present could see the truth reflected in the audit logs, the email chains, and Alexander's steady gaze. Her charm, carefully constructed over months, crumbled in an instant. Wendy, seated quietly, felt a surge of relief. She had endured humiliation, false accusations, and manipulation, yet she remained intact. The truth, finally revealed, restored her dignity. Clara's voice was sharp, defensive, and trembling. I didn't do anything. It's not what it looks like. Alexander's expression hardened. Clara, every piece of evidence points to your actions. You tried to ruin Wendy's reputation, manipulate perception, and deceive this office. There is no ambiguity here. You will face the consequences. Colleagues whispered, glances shifting from Clara to Wendy. The atmosphere was charged with the satisfaction of justice served. Wendy's reputation, which had been unjustly tarnished, began to shine once more. Her calm, integrity-driven response contrasted sharply with Clara's desperation and guilt. Eleanor, observing from the background, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The tests had revealed the truth. Wendy's character had withstood not only temptation but also deceit and malice. She had demonstrated loyalty, resilience, and unwavering honesty. These were qualities Eleanor had sought for her son's future partner. Alexander turned to Wendy. I want to apologize for the confusion, Wendy, he said gently, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. I should have trusted you from the beginning. Your integrity has been evident all along, and I admire the strength you've shown throughout this ordeal. Wendy's eyes welled with tears, a mixture of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Alexander. I didn't know how to handle it, but I tried to do the right thing. You did more than try, Alexander replied. You succeeded. Clara's humiliation was complete. She had underestimated the combination of integrity, patience, and observation that Eleanor had orchestrated. Her schemes, no matter how meticulously crafted, had been transparent to those with insight and ethical clarity. The office witnessed the unmasking of duplicity, and for the first time, Clara felt the sting of defeat not just professionally but morally. Eleanor decided it was time for the final revelation. She removed her disguise, stepping into the office not as a cleaner but as the matriarch she truly was. The room fell silent, every eye turning to the elegant woman whose quiet presence had been a constant undercurrent of the recent events. Everyone, Eleanor's voice commanded attention, I believe you have seen the consequences of deceit and the rewards of integrity. Wendy has proven herself not only competent but honest and kind. She has passed every test without compromise. Gasps and murmurs spread through the room. Clara's jaw tightened as she processed the truth. The humble cleaner she had mocked, attempted to manipulate, and tried to frame was, in fact, the owner's wife, the woman who had orchestrated every test and observed every interaction with meticulous care. Alexander's eyes widened as he absorbed the revelation. Mama, he whispered, a mix of shock and awe in his voice. Eleanor nodded, her gaze warm but steady. Yes, Alexander. Every test was designed to protect the company and to ensure that those around you could be trusted. Wendy has proven herself beyond doubt. Clara, your actions have consequences. Integrity is not just a virtue, it is a shield against the machinations of those who seek to manipulate others for personal gain. Clara's face paled. She stammered, searching for words, but the gravity of her actions was undeniable. The office, now fully aware of Eleanor's identity, fell into a mixture of awe, relief, and whispered astonishment. Wendy, overwhelmed by the revelation, turned to Eleanor. Mama, all this time, you. Eleanor smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on Wendy's shoulder. Yes, my daughter. I had to see if your heart was true. And it was. You have passed the greatest test, not for wealth, position, or favor, but for character, integrity, and courage. These are qualities that no money can buy, and no deception can undermine. Alexander stepped forward, his gaze on Wendy filled with admiration. I see now what you always knew, Mama. Wendy, you have shown more strength and honesty than anyone I've known. I am grateful to have you not just in the company, but in my life. The office exhaled collectively, a tension that had built for weeks dissolving into relief and celebration. Clara, though defeated, remained in stunned silence, her ambitions crushed by the unwavering integrity of another. The balance of power, justice, and truth had been restored. As the day ended, Eleanor and Wendy walked together toward the parking lot, the evening sun casting a warm glow over the city. Eleanor spoke softly, "The most difficult trials are not the ones we see coming. They are the tests of character, resilience, and heart. You have passed them all, my daughter." Wendy smiled, the weight of recent events lifting, replaced by pride, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Mama. For guiding me, for believing in me, for protecting me." Eleanor nodded, her heart full. Now, the final chapter awaits. The world will continue to test us, but with integrity and courage, we will endure. And soon, Alexander will understand the full measure of your heart, not just as a colleague, but as someone truly extraordinary. As they parted for the evening, the office returned to a quiet rhythm, forever altered by the events that had unfolded. The schemes, the manipulation, and the deceit had been exposed. Integrity had triumphed. And the stage was set for a future where trust, honesty, and genuine connection would shape the lives of all who had witnessed the drama unfold. The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the city in a golden glow. Eleanor, in her true form, observed from the window of her modest home. The final confrontation had revealed the truth, but she knew the next act, the building of bonds, the recognition of character, and the unfolding of love, was about to begin. Wendy's journey was far from over, but now, with integrity intact and the schemers exposed, the path ahead was clear. The night air was cool and still, carrying with it the promise of justice, revelation, and new beginnings. And as Eleanor watched over those she cared for, she knew that the greatest test had been passed, and the future, though uncertain, was filled with hope, honesty, and the unbreakable strength of character. The next morning, the office felt different. The air was lighter, almost buoyant. The tension that had gripped the staff for weeks after Clara's exposure was gone, replaced by a sense of relief and cautious optimism. Word had spread that Wendy had been innocent all along and that Clara's scheming had been fully exposed by the evidence Alexander had uncovered. Colleagues whispered among themselves, many offering quiet apologies, others simply observing the change in dynamics. Wendy arrived early, as usual, but this time, her heart carried a sense of calm rather than anxiety. She walked through the office corridors with a quiet confidence, no longer weighed down by suspicion, humiliation, or fear. Eleanor had prepared her for this moment, not just for survival, but for thriving with integrity intact. Alexander, now more observant than ever, watched Wendy from his office window. He had spent the previous evening reviewing every detail of the case, every piece of evidence, and every action taken by Wendy. Her composure under pressure, her unwavering honesty, and her thoughtful decisions had left a profound impression on him. He realized that her strength wasn't just professional, it was personal. She carried herself with dignity, even when faced with the most insidious deceit. The first thing Alexander did was ensure that Wendy's name was fully cleared. He convened a brief meeting with the finance team, reviewing the records once again and publicly acknowledging that Wendy had been framed. The team, who had initially been uncertain, now witnessed firsthand the injustice that had been inflicted upon her and recognized her integrity. Alexander then addressed the office. Effective immediately, Wendy's record is cleared. She has demonstrated exceptional professionalism, integrity, and resilience. Let this be a reminder that honesty is not only respected here but honored. Those who attempt deception will be held accountable. A ripple of murmurs went through the office. Clara, sitting silently at her desk, felt the weight of judgment pressing down. She had been confident that her schemes would succeed, yet every plan had failed spectacularly. Her colleagues now looked at her with a mixture of pity, disappointment, and, in some cases, quiet vindication. Her reputation, once polished and intimidating, was now tarnished. Meanwhile, Eleanor, standing discreetly at the back, allowed herself a satisfied smile. The test was complete. Wendy had passed with unwavering integrity. More importantly, the manipulator, Clara, had been fully exposed, leaving no doubt about the consequences of deceit. Later that day, Alexander invited Wendy into his office, not to discuss accusations or professional performance, but simply to speak privately. She entered, nervous but composed, unsure what to expect. Wendy, Alexander began, his tone gentle, I want to apologize again, not just for the misunderstanding, but for doubting what I should have seen from the start. You handled everything with grace and integrity. I am grateful for that. Wendy smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. Thank you, Alexander. I didn't know how to respond at first, but I tried to do the right thing. I'm glad it's over. It's not just over, Alexander replied, his gaze lingering on her. It's the beginning of something much more important. I've watched how you treat people, how you handle challenges, and how you maintain your values even under pressure. That is rare, and it's exactly what we need in this company, and in life. Wendy felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of embarrassment and something deeper she couldn't quite name. She realized that Alexander's admiration wasn't just professional, it carried weight, intent, and sincerity. That evening, Eleanor invited Wendy for another dinner at her home. But this time, it was celebratory rather than instructive. The house was filled with a sense of warmth, the aroma of a hearty meal welcoming Wendy as she entered. The table was set, not extravagantly, but with care, a testament to Eleanor's thoughtful preparation. My daughter, Eleanor began as they sat down, you have endured trials that would break many, yet you have remained steadfast. Today, you are not just vindicated, you are honored. Remember that integrity is always rewarded, though sometimes in ways that take time to reveal. Wendy nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. Thank you, Mama. I feel like a weight has been lifted. But I also know I couldn't have done it without your guidance. You saw things I couldn't. Eleanor reached across the table, placing her hand over Wendy's. And now, my daughter, the next chapter begins. Life will offer you opportunities that are just as challenging as the ones you've faced, but this time, with trust, support, and love to guide you. At that very moment, Alexander arrived at Eleanor's home. He had come to personally apologize, to thank Wendy, and, perhaps most importantly, to acknowledge the connection that had grown between them over the past weeks. Wendy's heart raced as she saw him approach, his expression a mixture of admiration, respect, and a deep, unspoken affection. Wendy, he said softly, I wanted to be the first to congratulate you, not just on your vindication, but on everything you've accomplished. You've shown strength, integrity, and kindness, even in the face of extreme adversity. I respect you more than I can express. Wendy felt her heart swell. She had never imagined that the man she had met under such ordinary circumstances could see her for who she truly was. And yet, here he was recognizing not just her professional talent, but her character, courage, and heart. Alexander took a step closer. There is something I need to ask you, Wendy. Something more than just professional, something personal. Will you consider joining me, not just in work, but in life? I can think of no one more deserving, more capable, or more admirable. Tears formed in Wendy's eyes as she realized the depth of the moment. She had been tested, challenged, and wronged, yet through it all, integrity and perseverance had brought her here, standing at the threshold of personal and professional fulfillment. Yes, Wendy whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, Alexander. I would. The following weeks saw a transformation in the office. Clara, faced with public exposure and disciplinary action, was removed from key projects and reassigned to a position that reflected her limitations. Her reputation suffered, a cautionary tale about ambition without ethics. Wendy, now fully recognized for her talent and character, took on more responsibilities. Alexander worked closely with her, not just as a supervisor, but as a partner in vision and strategy. Together, they began implementing reforms and initiatives that reflected fairness, transparency, and integrity, the very values that Wendy had exemplified throughout the trials. Outside the office, their relationship deepened. They shared quiet dinners, thoughtful conversations, and moments of laughter that felt like a reward for the trials they had both witnessed. Eleanor observed this quietly, satisfied that her tests had borne fruit, not just in revealing Wendy's character, but in ensuring a partnership built on trust, respect, and genuine connection. Clara, meanwhile, faced consequences that extended beyond professional embarrassment. Her personal life began to unravel as colleagues distanced themselves and opportunities evaporated. The manipulative, deceitful path she had chosen had no place in the world Wendy and Alexander were building. Months passed. Wendy and Alexander's bond grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and love. The office became a model of ethical practice, with colleagues inspired by Wendy's integrity and Alexander's commitment to fairness. Eleanor, finally revealing her full role in the tests, received gratitude and acknowledgement from all who had witnessed the transformation. Her wisdom, patience, and guidance had not only revealed character but had shaped the future of the company and its people. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Wendy and Alexander walked together along the quiet streets near Eleanor's home. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant hum of city life. They paused, taking in the moment, the trials, and the journey that had brought them here. "Wendy," Alexander said, taking her hand, "everything we've been through, it's led us to this. I am grateful, not just for what you've done, but for who you are. And I promise, we'll build a future together that reflects the values you've shown every day." Wendy smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't ask for more, Alexander. All the tests, the challenges, the hardships, they were worth it. I've learned that integrity and love can withstand anything, and now we can build something lasting." They embraced, the city lights shimmering around them, a symbol of triumph, justice, and new beginnings. Eleanor watched from a distance, a satisfied smile gracing her face. The trials had ended. Integrity had prevailed. Love had been affirmed. And the future, bright, honest, and filled with promise, lay ahead. The office, the company, and the lives intertwined within it had been forever changed. Wendy had endured, Clara had been exposed, and Alexander had found a partner whose character was as remarkable as her courage. And in that quiet moment, Eleanor knew that the tests had achieved their ultimate purpose, revealing true character, fostering genuine connection, and ensuring that integrity would always triumph over deceit. As night fell, Eleanor reflected on the journey, her thoughts resting on the young woman who had passed every test with unwavering strength. Wendy had proven that honesty, courage, and kindness were more powerful than any scheme, more enduring than any wealth, and more transformative than any trial. And so, the story concluded not with chaos or revenge, but with justice, love, and the enduring lesson that integrity and character are the truest measures of a person's worth. Wendy had been tested, tried, and triumphant, and her life, now intertwined with Alexander's, promised a future of fairness, trust, and genuine happiness. The sun rose the next morning over a city forever altered by truth and courage, marking the start of a new chapter, one where honesty and love would shape every decision, every relationship, and every victory yet to come. As we reach the end of this captivating tale, we hope you've been transported to new worlds and inspired by the characters and stories that have unfolded before your eyes. Timeless Stories is more than just a YouTube channel, it's a community of story lovers who share a passion for exploring the human experience through the art of storytelling. By subscribing to our channel, you'll be treated to a wide range of stories that will captivate your imagination, spark your creativity, and inspire you to think differently about the world around you. From timeless classics to modern tales, our stories will transport you to new and exciting worlds, introducing you to characters that will stay with you long after the story ends. But that's not all. By joining our community of story lovers, you'll get access to exclusive content, including behind-the-scenes insights into our storytelling process, sneak peeks at upcoming videos, and opportunities to engage with other fans who share your passion for stories. So why wait? Subscribe to Timeless Stories today and join our growing community of story enthusiasts. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads, and let's keep exploring the world of stories together.